Hello, everybody. To those of you in Massachusetts and throughout the country joining us today, good evening. My name is Samuel Gebru. I am the managing director of Black Lion Strategies. It's my own nonprofit and political consulting company. We see problems as opportunities, ideas are solutions, and really committed to causing, as the late John Lewis once said, good trouble. And most importantly, having fun while doing it. I'm really thrilled to welcome you today to the Color of Public Service, a conversation on navigating government and politics. This event, hosted by Black Lion Strategies, is part of the Fierce Urgency of Now annual festival. It's a decentralized 5-day convening with over 3,000 participants and over 30 events for young professionals of color and our allies. This festival, designed to help make Greater Boston a more inclusive place to live, work, play, and innovate, is organized by City Awake, the Young Professionals Initiative of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank some key folks for helping me put this together. I want to thank Keith Chappelle for administering today's webinar. Thank you to Sheena Collier of the Collier Connection, the mastermind behind the Fierce Urgency of Now Festival, as well as Hannah Zinn, Denise McIsaac, Haley Glenn, Casey Baines, and everyone else at the Chamber for their assistance with this event and putting together the entire festival. I hope everyone is keeping safe and healthy. Obviously, this pandemic has been excruciatingly challenging for all of us. And I just want to recognize that, there are about 200,000 of our fellow Americans who have died so far, and about 1 million people globally. And it's definitely going to take a while before we move forward. But I hope in doing so, we can chart a new normal together, and one that is indeed more equitable and more just for all people. So this panel discussion is indeed being recorded. We look forward to sharing the video soon. Please utilize the chat. I already see that it's popping, so please utilize the chat and the question answer features of this Zoom webinar. We are tracking your questions and your comments, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. My panelists today are all trailblazers. They are public servants. As I like to describe it, they are committed to walking this earth with purpose and leaving it more whole than they found it. I've worked on many election campaigns. I ran for office myself in 2017, and getting more people of color and more young people involved in politics and government is deeply important to me, and I know it is important to all of our panelists. So I want to welcome our panelists, the Honorable Ayanna Pressley, United States Representative for the 7th Congressional District of Massachusetts. She is my representative in Congress, and a damn fine one at that, if I can say. She has never met a ceiling she couldn't smash. She is the first woman of color to represent the Commonwealth in Congress, elected in 2018, the first woman of color elected to the Boston City Council. She is a longtime, or was a longtime aide to Representative Joe Kennedy II, as well as Senator John Kerry. Mehreen Butt, Wakefield Town Councilor, raised in Massachusetts as the daughter of Pakistani immigrants. She is the first Muslim woman elected for municipal office in Massachusetts in 2017. She's an attorney, currently serving as Associate Director of Policy and Government Affairs at the Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts. Mehreen comes with deep experience in policy and advocacy at all levels of government. Sarai Rivera, Worcester City Councilor, Puerto Rican, born in the Bronx and raised in New York, trained as a social worker, holds a doctorate in urban ministries, and is an ordained pastor along with her husband. Sarai brings with her deep experience in community organizing and community mental health, especially interventions for multicultural populations in urban settings. Councilor Rivera was elected in 2012 as the first Latina in Worcester City Council, and for a while was the only person of color in Worcester's governmental delegation, from federal all the way down. Reynolds Graves, Vice President of Public Affairs at SKDKnickerbocker. He is a Michigan native, Massachusetts transplant, and now I like to call him part of the Massachusetts diaspora living in New York City. He is deeply experienced in public policy, government relations, and public affairs. His rich background includes serving as a senior staffer on the Boston City Council and in the office of Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick. And more recently, he has held positions at the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department in Boston and at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law in Washington, D.C. And last but certainly not least, Samuel Hyun I will call you Sam for this conversation, is a commissioner on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts' Asian American Commission. He was appointed by Speaker Robert DeLeo for that role. He is the son of Korean immigrants raised in Massachusetts, former longtime aide to Massachusetts House Speaker Bob DeLeo, where in addition to various legislative priorities, he was also tasked with the Speaker's Foreign Affairs portfolio, where he welcomed numerous dignitaries to Massachusetts, including the then Secretary General of the United Nations. And he's currently earning his Master of Public Policy while also serving as the Executive Director of the Korean American Citizens League of New England. So welcome to all of you. You all are extraordinary. How are you doing today? Good morning.
Doing great, Sam. Thanks for being here.
I was raised in Worcester, by the way, not New York, even though I
Yes.
have a little bit of the New York Bronx accent when I say water and dog.
I love that. Well, so let's get right into it. This conversation is a conversation among friends. And I want to start with Representative Pressley. And this is a question to all of you, but we'll start with Rep. Pressley. Where did you get your public service bug? Was there an incident, an epiphany, or were you raised in a civic household?
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be with all of you virtually. I wish we could physically be together. And Sam, thank you. I've often said that the most important person in the room is the one that can get everyone in the same room. And you have done that over and over again. And so we're grateful for you. And, I don't know how to be anybody else but myself. So I'm just going to be really transparent and just say that I'm grateful for this convening, especially today. I think we're politicized the moment we're born.
Mm-hmm.
And that should just be as evidenced by the crises all around us right now. I'm just, heavy on my heart today are the immigrant women in detention that are experiencing mass hysterectomies.
Yeah.
Our loved ones, our neighbors that are behind the wall in environments that are punitive and harmful, that treat trauma with trauma. A Black maternal mortality crisis, a pandemic that is hitting our communities the hardest. So I think we're politicized the moment we're born. I remember spending time with a disability justice activist and asking Diana, when was the moment that you were politicized? How long have you been working on social justice issues or transit access for individuals living with disabilities? And she said, well, I'm 29. And I said, right, that's how old you are. And she said, well, since I was born, right? So we're politicized the moment we come into this world. I also was raised in a household with a mother who was a tenants' rights activist under the Urban League of Chicago, and also a community organizer amongst many jobs that she held. And she taught me, many lessons, but two I'll lift and then I'll move on. The first is that I should be proud to be Black. It's a beautiful thing, but that I was being born into a struggle, and that she had an expectation that I was going to do my part in that struggle. Secondly, that in life, there's a difference between your job and your work, that your job is what pays the bills, and your work with a capital W is the work that you do, committed to the upliftment and the advancement of your community. And so more pointedly, in my household, that meant the full liberation and emancipation of all people, but certainly Black folk. And, my mother did not read me nursery rhymes or traditional bedtime stories. Instead, she read me the speeches of Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm. So, I hope in word and deed, I'm delivering a love letter to her from on high every day.
Thank you, Representative. Really curious to hear from other folks too. Reynolds, I know that you grew in a political family as well. Your father is a retired judge. When did you get your bug?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think you're right about that. My family's been fairly active in politics throughout my life. I remember as a kid being at rallies and inauguration ceremonies and the like. My father is a Kennedy Democrat. His father was a, Booker T. Washington, Eisenhower Democrat, if you will. For me, I think my bug, so to speak, was, I consider myself an Obama Democrat. That was the first kind of, I think, big political movement that I felt that I had a stake in, that I could be a part of. But I think the encouragement to follow through and to participate in that was because I saw my peers also feeling the same way. I think so often before Obama came along, I had been attracted to politics, interacting with it, curious about it, wanting and had a desire to learn more. But I always kind of saw my peers stepping away or not wanting to also join me and be a part of it, no matter how hard I tried to get them to a Saturday morning rally in high school or what have you. I think the candidacy and the election of Barack Obama certainly changed the way a lot of us view politics. As a millennial, I'm 32, so I'll put myself in that category. But especially for millennials of color, we were very much, we saw ourselves in him. We saw ourselves in his family and his wife and his children. And so I think that was the kind of first bug that I really got active. I went to a historically black college in Virginia. I was, leading the Students for Barack Obama effort down there, which spiraled into the few other points on my resume that you mentioned in the introduction. So I think that was kind of my first bug, really. But, I've been involved in things before that, school committee stuff back home in Grosse Pointe and the like. So always been pretty active.
Thank you. So one of the articles that I shared over social media in advance of this event was an article from the Pew Research Center. It found that about 2% of Americans have said that they have ever run for federal, local, or state elected office in their lifetime. So some key facts here. There are about 90,000 different governmental units in the United States, different offices and positions. There are about 500,000 elected positions, including dog catcher in Duxbury, Vermont. That is an elected position. And overwhelmingly, those who run, according to the Pew Research Center's findings, are overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male, and overwhelmingly degree holders. So I'm going to start with you, Mehreen. Why does this matter? You won in a town that is over 90% white, and you're not that. So why do these statistics matter, and why do they not matter? And particularly, sort of, how do we expand the map of people of color in government and politics in places where we're severely underrepresented?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Easy question, huh? And making me follow Reynolds and my sister Ayanna Pressley. So we need more people that look like us having a seat at the table, and I've been doing that for my entire career, whether it be on boards, in policymaking nonprofits, or in government. And I realized my town hall didn't look like me. There was no one on our, it was called Board of Selectmen at the time. There was no one under 40. There was no one of color. There's only 2 women at the time. And so I have been a lobbyist and worked in government affairs. And so I thought, hey, let me try this and see if I like running for office. And I actually, the first time I ran was in 2016, and I lost, and I knew I would lose because I was a first-time candidate. I just moved to town 3 years earlier. And it was a special election over the summer. There was a vacant seat, and I thought I'd try it. And I actually really liked it. I had done behind the scenes. I had door knocked for all of our friends throughout the state, from, Deval Patrick to Elizabeth Warren to everyone up and down I worked at the State House, so door knocked for my former state rep, Frank Smizek. And I always said I'd run again, and I did. And I ran a smarter campaign, a better campaign, and became, as you said, the first Muslim American elected, and as proud woman to a municipality. And as proud as I was of that moment, in April 2017, I actually was more impressed and more prouder in November when 2 other Muslim women joined me in Massachusetts. So Sumbul Siddiqui in Cambridge and Afroz Khan in Newburyport. So we tripled in a year. And then in February, Maya Jamaluddin in Melrose joined us. So now there's 4 of us. And that to me is progress, because we are bringing a voice and experience and a viewpoint to the table that just wasn't there. And all of us have accomplished things that weren't people in policy and people in government weren't thinking about. So yeah, that's a little bit of why I ran. And the story that I just tell everyone, I'm a daughter of a physician. I do this work because my parents instilled in me helping the vulnerable and building community. And I didn't, and through our mosque and through our religion, it was what my faith taught me to help people who don't have a voice. And this is the way that I get to do that. But when I decided to run and I went home and I told my parents, my father, physician, turned to me and he's like, so what does it pay? And I was like, it doesn't pay anything. And he's like, but I don't understand why you want to do this. And explaining to, as a child of immigrants, explaining to your parents who have worked so hard for you to be comfortable and not to get hurt, right? And it was a moment of, as an adult, knowing my parents, they didn't know this world. We did not grow up going to rallies. They voted. They believed in government, but they weren't a part of it. And explaining to them, and they became my best volunteers. So my dad built all my signs. They came to all my fundraisers. None of my family got to vote for me. None of them live in my town. But I always think back to that of like, we have a lot of work to do in our communities about why this is important to have that diversity at the table.
Thank you for that, Mehreen. I'd love to sort of get other thoughts from you all on this in terms of running for office, whether it was you, Councilor Rivera, or Representative Pressley, then City Councilor Pressley, thinking about being in these bodies that are, venerated, they're deliberative, they're powerful, but at the same time, there seems to, at that time at least, there was seemingly no space for someone new, someone different. What is going through your mind, or what was going through your mind at that time when you said, I'm going to join that body?
I thought for me, I needed to get on medication and get some serious help. So, I do not come from like a political background, and I was always been very active because I'm third generation pastor, first female in my family. And as a clinical social worker, when you start working with, let's say you're helping someone in my early days of social work, helping someone bring food or working with families that are being kind of torn apart, then you think about, okay, you bring someone food, but why are they hungry? Why is hunger even existing in this like nation of so much wealth? And, I started working from there and looking at the inequities of health and mental health and the inequities of education and the juvenile system. It was all, and so inevitably had to get active. I think for me, my faith had a lot to do with it, which was the Great Commission and the Great Commandment, loving neighbor, regardless who that neighbor is. And then really understanding. And so I was always very active, but I used to say, well, when I would speak, because I'm a preacher, not a politician, I can say what I want to say. To me, the politicians were like on the evil side, right? So when I came, it was really, really hard for me. And I remember the first time somebody called me a politician, I like literally cried. I'm like, oh my God, they call me a politician. It was like a curse word, and I had to call my mentor who I did my doctorate with, and he, helped me out and supported. He's like, oh, this is what it means. And it really took a lot, for a long time, people were saying you should run. And I'm like, no. And then it came to a point, I have someone who's a really good friend of mine, he's like a soul brother and my campaign manager, who really had me reflect and had me go to that spiritual place, and I felt that this was definitely a calling and not anything I really wanted to do. It really disrupted my life as to the path I wanted. But to me and my faith, I follow the journey that God has for me. And I really felt that it was important. No matter how, I always tell this story, like, let's say you're really good friends with a gynecologist, right? Like, and he is, so there's three of you that hang out, right? And one of them is like this really renowned, and he's super feminist, and he's great. And, he's great on women's liberation, and y'all going out at night, and, You're kind of then talking about how women, when they're together, they cycle together. Ladies, y'all know what I'm talking about. And you're having that conversation, right? About, oh my God, I need to order that chocolate, dessert and with the Reese's peanut butter cup. And then my brother here decides to say, yeah, I'm gonna get a piece. And you talk about bloating. He goes, yeah, the terrible bloating. I know. I hear. We all gonna look cross-eyed at him like, what do you know about bloating? About crap? No, right? We'd all be looking at him funny. Why? Because he does, yeah, I get it. You can read all about it, whatever, but really to understand. And I think that people understand when Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley said we're born in the struggle, it's so true. Like, how many of us can know stories since very young, seeing things with our parents that we didn't understand were happening because we were so young, but now can understand it now, right? And so how do you make those policies and decisions when you really don't and there's a struggle? And yeah, there are many people that are getting educated, and that's important, but it takes all this struggle and education. And we see this on this council. And we had an all-white governmental delegation. There was no one on school committee. Now, were we having almost 45% people of color in the city of Worcester? Second largest city in New England, right? One of the oldest, established states. We look at Massachusetts, supposed to be progressive. We had no one in school committee, no one in city council out of 11, no one in state rep, no one in our federal representation of color at all. Scary. And so here I came and I challenged a 10-year incumbent, which everybody thought that, oh, poor Rivera, she's nice and all. And not only did we win, and I always say we, because this was a we win of the people, we won by like a 65%. And so it was really a cry of the people. It was acting on that power of now, of saying, do you hear the cry of the people, and responding to that. I kind of came like Moses, kicking and screaming, but felt it important. So, and I think it's really mattered, because since then, I now have 2 other people of color in council, and that was like a dream for me. And can't wait to see the rest of it, and at the state level and other things diversify.
Yeah, I would just, I just want to reiterate a theme I picked up on earlier. So, I'm reminded of another conversation I had with someone I do movement building work with, a Black trans woman. And she was just saying that, others call what we do social justice, but this is just my life, right? And so as a Black trans woman, doesn't feel that she has any other option than to do the work of social justice. And so I want to hold space for 2 things, though. Yes, my mother did say that I was being born into a struggle, but she also, made sure I was reminded of the fact that I was being born into greatness, right? And a parent is a child's first teacher. So, I could move with that level of self-agency and determination because I knew that. Shout out to Thaddeus Miles and Councilor Mejia, who just designated and celebrated the first official Black Joy Day in the city of Boston. And one of the things that Thaddeus Miles, one of the phrases on the merchandise, the swag for the day, was that, our greatness is older than our oppression, right? And so, yes, we are being born into a struggle, but we're also we're born into greatness. But because of the impact of systemic racism and structural oppression, social justice is not something that we, fall into by accident. We don't have any choice, because we have to be doing the work to actively dismantle these structures and these systems, which seek to choke our promise so that our full greatness can bear out, right? So I just wanted to say that. And then so far as my own run for office, that's been, very, very well documented. But I'll just say that, like many people, someone else planted the seed in me, saw that in me. I'm humbled that they did. I was an aide for 16 years. And I just want to give a shout out to all the aides, because all the activists and all the movements, because, Congress and the Senate and everyone gets the credit. But this work happens because of movements, and it happens because of aides who whisper in the ear of a member, who pull an elbow, who stay up till 2:00 in the morning, writing a memo. I mean, that's how this happens. And so I was an aide behind the scenes for 16 years, 4 in the House, 11 in the Senate. And I found that work to be very meaningful, very impactful, very purposeful, very rewarding. And I was not looking to run for anything. Although in high school, I was voted most likely to be the mayor of Chicago. And in my youthful arrogance at the time, I was like, is that all? But later, because I was very traditional in that way. I was class president, I was student government president, I had all that kind of stuff going, but I was really just in everything trying to develop me so that I could develop and build up my community. And I just want to ask folks to please, do this work to be strivers and not climbers. Representation means nothing if you don't bring any righteousness to that table. That doesn't mean anything. So please, seek to, when we're in these rooms, and I promise I'll end here, but it's thoughtful questions, and so a rich discussion here. But, I know what it is, we all do, to be in a space where you're the only. And you worry about being pigeonholed and being stereotyped. And you're the one in the room that asks the same questions. But that's why you're there, to call the question, to shake the table. That's why I'm not even I love Shirley Chisholm, but I don't even use that quote anymore about if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. Because we're still bringing a new chair to an old table.
Yeah, say it, girl.
We got to create a whole new table. So representation without righteousness doesn't mean anything. We need folks that are going to be fearless and unapologetic and flinching, because we will not be able to undo 400 plus years of oppression for all of us if we're not moving in that direction. This is the fierce urgency of now. Reverend Barber says we're in a moment of national reckoning. We all know that. But he says that reckoning demands of us a third reconstruction. So that means all of us have to be community builders in that. So I loved being an aide. Shout out to the aides. Love being a part of movements. Shout out to the movement builders. And I loved being an elected official only because I wanted to be a policymaker. Because all the things, the hurts that our communities have experienced were not naturally occurring. They were legislated.
Thank you, Representative. I specifically wore my Sunday best for you. I knew you were going to church at some point.
I'm doing the, there's a whole Instagram on like black turtlenecks. Like that is just like what I'm the happiest in. But I'm gonna.
Oh my God! They would have worn mine. I don't know.
I'm telling you, I'm gonna have to change before votes. But you wore your Sunday best because you thought I would take you to church, but not because you thought I'd be Natalie attired. Because I wasn't on that today. I'm in an active state of mind right now. So
let's dive deeper on staffers. I love that you mentioned staffers, Rep. Pressley. I was going to get to that. What does it mean to bring our whole authentic selves into powerful spaces? Like you said, it's not about bringing a folding chair to an old table, especially in this moment of the new normal, whatever that is. We need to completely reimagine and redesign everything. And so, there's been an initiative on Beacon Hill lately. Staffers of color, primarily Black staffers, have been really making waves, and they've been pushing legislators to extend the legislative session, to think more deeply and proactively about policy. Sam, Reynolds, both of you have served on Beacon Hill, and I want to hear from both of you on what does it mean? What are our backgrounds that we bring with us every day? How is it that we show up for our communities through policy? Because as I often say to people, if you want to get in good with a government official, it's not just getting good with the official. You really want to work with the staff, because they're the ones that are informing a lot of the decision making.
Yeah, I think I definitely wanted to start by recognizing the greatness in this room, not just, with the representatives here, the councilors, Reynolds, Sam, but also the folks who are attending, right? So it's everyone that's attending here is coming with a heart to want to change the world for the better. Kind of piggybacking off of what Representative Pressley said about building a whole damn new table, right? I wore this shirt with President Obama on it for a reason, because that's who I recognize as the president, not as again, copying the Congresswoman, not the resident in the Oval Office right now. But in terms of as a staffer, I was a former staffer to the Speaker of the House, and I think it's important for me to speak truth to power, which is the fact that there are changes that need to happen within the State House. And I think a lot of that has to do with representation, the lacking of it. You can't understand something you don't know, and if you don't know the perspective and the experience of what it's like to be a person of color, I'm not a, I'm an East Asian, light-skinned, Asian American man, so I don't know the experience of South Asian, women. I simply just don't. And so to me, I believe it's building on collective intelligence, which is when you have diversity of thought, different perspectives, that's always going to win out over, you have a superstar team of IQs of over 130. Studies have shown that collective intelligence, which is diversity in thought, diversity in perspective, is always going to win out, because you're covering all the bases and you're having different ideas come into play. And you may have an idea that came from a 3-year-old that was just saying something just because that might spark something, as opposed to somebody who was in politics for 55 years. Doesn't mean that person with 55 years of experience doesn't matter, because that's that institutional knowledge that is so instrumental, that we do need against bad actors, right? Because there are bad actors that use that institutional knowledge in order to undercut younger folks who don't have that experience. So it's that merging of the two. But speaking on Beacon Block, I thought it was important for me to be unequivocally standing in solidarity with my Black colleagues and friends of Beacon Block. That if they were brave enough and courageous enough to speak up about the change that need to be made, that myself have been a former staffer, having worked for a man who couldn't make the changes, that I had to be publicly very vocal about it. And the second thing is the fact of what we're asking of these staffers. Not only are we asking them to work till 2 o'clock writing memos, not only are we asking them to make under $48,000 a year, not only are we asking them to make monumental sacrifices of having to be in that building as a person of color, we're now asking them to carry the burden and the cross of having to change the State House. Whereas other staffers who are not people of color, who are not especially particularly Black, do not have to worry about that, right? One of the things I was thinking about was, I can only speak for myself, was I come from a family, a single mother home. My mom, she canvassed for President Obama twice. She encouraged me to pursue my passion. For me, it was to build representation. Now, for me, one of my dreams is my mom is still not a homeowner. I want to be able to make sure that she can own a home, which is part of the American dream. And I want to be able to have her retire, which means that I have to be able to make enough money at some point to not only sustain myself, provide for my family, provide for my mother, and to be able to live a life of which, just basic necessities. I've noticed for staff members of color, that is a struggle that we all share, is that we are not only our own retirement plan, but our parents' retirement plan. And that may not be the case for families who have significantly more wealth, such as, the white families. If you look in the city of Boston, white families' median household wealth is over $200,000, whereas the Black family is $8. What does that tell you? Where is that wealth coming from? It's from home ownership. And so these are all things that weigh heavily on all the staff members of color, that I think is a perspective that maybe not everybody has to experience.
I couldn't agree more, Sam. And on the Beacon Block, I certainly, I appreciate and really love and respect the efforts of the Black staffers on Beacon Hill. I worked in Boston politics for 10 years, both in the city council and the State House. And in that time, I had seen, electorally incremental change. You've seen women top the ticket. You've seen a councilor become a congresswoman. You've seen the Latinas represented on the council now. You see a lot, and you see a diversity of staff. But I think what you don't see, and what you still have a major issue with, is creating the community and infrastructure that is necessary to sustain and to grow that. The Beacon Block is a good start, but even, for instance, Congresswoman Pressley, you all had a Black electeds meeting, I believe, every Friday or every other Friday or one Friday a month or something. I used to schedule too many people to go to that. But there was never really a counterpart for staffers. Sure, we would run into each other at Filibuster and Carry Nation and the ballot box out in Worcester during the conventions, and that's all fine and dandy. But as far as how often staffers of color would get together, would strategize, would share experiences, that was kind of more ad hoc. We'd have to seek it out, and it'd be great to see an entity, a state entity, or elected officials take that on. And kind of build the infrastructure that is necessary, because it's going to cost money a little bit. But I think that at the same time, there's also the need, and that could dive into there's a need for a pipeline. A lot of staffers get in there, especially staffers not of color. They get in there through unpaid internships. I was fortunate enough to have unpaid internships, but only and solely because I was able to also have, support of family members and friends that would help me sustain myself, quite frankly, or taking odd jobs or having the luxury of being able to do odd jobs while also working on unpaid internship. That's extremely rare. And Sam alluded to that earlier, that a lot of folks working in the State House were not just our own retirement plans. We are supporting other members of our family. So the process in which folks get into politics and stay in it and are able to grow and bring others with them, I think really needs to be supported. It is dragging friends out to knock doors and showing them how exciting the adrenaline rush of a campaign can be. It is showing them, it is taking them to a rally and hearing Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley speak, or a councilor somewhere else. It is involving them, in the census. It is making sure that they feel that they can have a stake in government. They feel that they can have a stake in influencing a principle. They feel that they can have a stake in bringing others along with them. And as Obama said, if you get frustrated, pick up a clipboard and run yourself. I think it's about encouraging others to continuously do that. But the infrastructure, especially from what I witnessed in Boston and Massachusetts, needs to be enhanced and created even more.
Appreciate that. There are two things that I want to uncover, and then we'll get to some audience questions we have up in the queue. One is around the idea of identity politics, right? I think, there are a lot of folks in this country that try to make identity politics look like some ugly, bad term. Many of you have been criticized yourselves for showing up and stepping up in our various identities, right? Whether it's your gender, your race, your sexuality, your immigration, whatever it is. And that's been an issue because I think a lot of folks sometimes want to shy away from talking about sort of the original sin of this country or the reality that so many things are baked in racism and in sexism. But then the second thing that I want to talk a little bit more about is imposter syndrome, because this is something that a lot of us face, right? Am I good enough? Am I adequate enough? Can I speak this certain way? Can I bring my authentic self to these tables? There are numerous experiences in my life, and I'm sure in yours, where you may have felt like you've had to hold back, or don't walk too fast. Don't be a little too angry. Don't speak a certain way. Don't dress a certain way. And I'd love to sort of get your thoughts on the imposter syndrome and identity politics. Rep. Pressley, we'll start with you.
Oh no, why don't we start with the councilor?
All right, we'll start. Councilor Rivera, Councilor Butt.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely this is a great question for me because this is a big issue. So I used to always say when I came on that it was like that Sesame Street song, which one of these is not like the others? And I've been also accused of being too honest. I come from a home of very strong women, that even though I grew up in a very patriarchal kind of environment from the spiritual kind of aspects back then, I had this like really strong woman. So it was like very contradictory. And so it was really about like, I'm here, this is who I am, and I'm unapologetic about it. And that came with challenges. Like it was always about like, I had people saying, oh, I can't wait, like on some of my council members at the time, oh, I can't wait till I see the hot-tempered Latina come out. And somehow that was okay. And I remember one time that one of the council members got up, had like a fit, she had this whole thing. And then I went up to the mayor and I said, he's not the one who had said it, but let it be duly noted that it wasn't the Latina who had a fit on the council floor. Because it was like this expectation. If I would just be emphatic or passionate about anything, I was angry. I was angry. People would say, oh, I know that underline, you're angry. It was always that kind of like thing. Or they would comment. I had a lot of comments about my looks. I've had comments about my hair. I would straighten my hair before a lot, and then I wear my hair curly. And I remember one time when I went, I had to braid my hair because I was traveling. I do a lot of work in Haiti and in Burundi, Africa. And that day I was traveling like at 3 a.m. and I don't always have access to water. So as we know, we have to be, I don't know if everybody understands the issue about the hair. I had to like braid it up. There was a whole issue about how I came looking gangster. It was just crazy. It was just stupidness, how people, when I would campaign and people would look, they would be like, oh, you have a doctorate? Like shocked. Like is educated. You know, it was just ridiculous. It was like, or when they would ask about a question of poverty and they'd look, and I remember one time I was on a panel and I said, I'm sorry, I didn't grow up poor. I didn't grow up poor, right? And so it was this assumption of these things. And that was always kind of like battling that. But I think it comes with its challenges, because people would, you know, I had to, like, I remember one of the things that I would do is I used to always love to wear hoops, but I would only wear hoops if I was out of Worcester, like on vacation or whatever. And I wouldn't wear the hoops because, you know, like that, or certain ways that I wouldn't dress, because then they would sexualize the whole stereotype of, you know, the woman of color, especially the Latina or whatever kind of thing. Also being challenged because I identify a lot with Afro-Indigenous, I identify as an Afro-Indigenous individual. And so I really embrace my Blackness, and I embrace my Indigenous. And one time this woman was like, oh, I have a problem with you. Why do you identify yourself as as being Black? I'm like, 'cause I am. And I say I'm as Black as Halle Berry. Like, people want to tell me what I am, where I fit in, you know. And so that Puerto Rican, I had to explain this whole thing of how Puerto Rican wasn't a race. I had to show a picture of my husband who's darker skin, right? And so, like, it was just crazy how I've had to always have conversations about, or people say, oh, where'd your accent come from? I don't know, because I was born here. Like, I was born and raised here. My Spanish, I wish it was a little better than it was. But all these things that kind of come up. But I think always like coming in and saying, you know, I think, you know, remembering my mom passed away when I was young, but remembering her to be able to say, you know, how she broke so many barriers in a very religious, patriarchal kind of community where male pastors would come to her, and she was the teacher and she was the professor and she was the one that they would come for advice. And seeing that, I think, helped me to say, you can be unapologetically who you are. And if they, just like I would tell my sons, you're growing up to be men of color. And people will always try to stereotype and always try to label you, but it is up to you to tear those labels off, and whether you accept those labels or not, and never be ashamed about who they are, you know, who you are, regardless of what people say. And I think I've taken that. That's been very problematic for people, because they see it as oppositional, they see it as confrontational, they see it as angry, but not really. But when they do something, it's acceptable. So you really have to juggle that level of hypocrisy that exists in this realm. And I oftentimes just call it out, because I believe, you know, truth. I think you have to be your authentic self, or if not. And I've been always said, oh, Councilor, you're just too honest, and that's a problem. But I think if we don't come with our authentic self, then there's something about us that just deteriorates, right? Like, you begin to slowly die if you're not who you are. And I just refuse to have anything. It's already tough enough to deal with all the things that are thrown at you. I mean, I was told if I had donors, then I was definitely laundering money. If I'm laundering money, I'm living in somewhere in Millionaire Row in Miami. Let me tell you, not working for nothing here in cold New England. I'm going to be a Millionaire Row in Miami. Then you can accuse me of laundering money. So all these things, if you don't come with your authentic self, there's a piece of you that will always die inside. And so for me, it was more important for me, for my community, and for my children that I was raising, you know, that they understand, as I believe in my faith, that we're beautifully and wonderfully made. And that's who I was going to be. And if they didn't like it, they were going to either learn from it or, you know, have to put up with it. But I wasn't going to go away.
So, Councilor Butt, you can answer that question, but I also have a specific audience question for you as well. So.
Okay. So just a couple things. I feel like we touched on so much. So I say this in all presentations that I do. Women are 51% of the population in America. Women are 23% of elected officials. And of that, 7% are women of color. So we have a long way to go towards equality. And I think all of us, and I'm going to, you know, reach out to the people that I know on this panel and the people in the audience, right? As people of color, we have this connection. We all have something in common. And I believe this in women too, that you might not agree with me on everything politically, but we have the same struggle, regardless of where you came from, that being a person of color in America, our struggles are real. And I think us that do this work, you know, I'm an attorney by training, like policy and law writing is what I know, but I've worked on campaigns, I've worked in government. And to me, since 2017, since 2016, since the occupant of the White House, right, that intersectionality of my struggles are your struggles and your struggles are my struggles has never been more true. And I've seen that. I've seen where, you know, my Muslim aunties voted yes on 3 2 years ago because trans rights are important to Muslim rights, right? It's the same thing. Somebody's trying to take away our dignity, our rights, our equality, our justice. And we all know. And so, you know, I don't know if we understand better, and I don't know if we have more empathy, but we are raised where kids in cages is not okay for us, regardless of the color of our skin, right? Police brutality is not okay, regardless of the color of your skin, and or your religion, being banned from coming to America because of your religion. And so I think that intersectionality is really, you know, we talk about it and it's movement building, but I think in the last couple of years, there's just been such focus, and that focus has led to more people running. And even in Massachusetts, we have more people of color and more diversity running. It is not great. I worked at the State House before Sam and 15 years ago, and there were actually more women of color elected 15 years ago than there are now. Like, why are the numbers decreasing? That's wrong, right? There is something wrong when you have a body of 200 people and there are less women of color and people of color than there were 15 years ago. It's changing. There's a couple more joining this year and hopefully more. And part of that is people, and so this is my last spiel, is everyone listening to this and all of my fellow parents, like, we are smart enough and we are good enough to run. And it takes, again, I'm wearing my women's lens, but you, and I say this all the time, so Sam's heard me say this on a few panels, but you, guess how many times you have to ask the average woman to run for office before she does it? I'm going to answer because I know time. 7. And guess how many times you have to ask a man? 1. And guess the average age that a woman runs for office in America. It's 40. And the average age a man runs for office, 23. So we have a lot of work to do before we get, you know, more women running for office and more diverse backgrounds and having different experiences. And just to everyone that's watching this, you know, I will say with that intersectionality and that we all have the same struggles and our struggles are all united, is reach out. There is a small community of us in Massachusetts who do this, but we have a sisterhood and a brotherhood, you know. They have texted me and asked me to sit on a panel. You know, I do it. We've worked on campaigns together for the last 4 years, right? I knock doors for Ayanna and I will do it anytime she calls me to do it. You know, that's just the sisterhood and the brotherhood that we have. So like, connect, ask, because it's not rocket science, but we are running campaigns differently because we're not the old school establishment. You know, I'm not, Sarai, I'm so jealous of you, but I'm not 3rd generation in my town, you know, like I'm.
Oh no, I'm not 3rd generation. I'm 3rd generation.
3rd generation preacher. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. But, you know, I didn't have endless cousins and aunts and my parents, none of my family voted for me on the ballot. You know, I wasn't the traditional candidate, but I activated my network, my aunties and my uncles and, you know, my law school friends and my college friends. I had people making calls from Chicago and California. You know, I had 16-year-olds from the high school who were just really excited about me as a candidate, who went knocking doors. They didn't have cars, they couldn't drive, they couldn't vote, but they took a lit packet and went door knocking for me, you know, and I will be eternally grateful for that. But it was because they saw somebody that looked like them and was talking about issues that mattered to them. So everyone out in the audience, reach out. We're here. My job only becomes easier when I have other people like me having the same conversations at tables all over. Like, it is not a Boston problem. It is not a Cambridge problem. Like, equality and justice is a problem for all of us. And the only way we're going to resolve it is we keep on having these conversations with people in power.
Thank you, Mehreen. Thank you, Councilor Butt. Rep. Pressley?
just because I know we're going to run out of time, and I know I got to get ready for votes in a minute, but just if you care about representation, complete your census. Okay, so I just want to give you a tangible thing. Complete your census, because that is as much about proportional representation as it is federal funds and investment in community. Secondly, the reason why we need to not just focus about diversity on the ballot, but we have to focus on the people behind the people behind the people, is because for many years, that was the pipeline, and we let go of that. Okay, so we have to be more intentional about succession planning. You know, so when you look at our state house, which is like the 99th percentile in the country in terms of turnover, that's not taking anything away from the incredible contribution and leadership of folks there. But folks have to be intentional about succession planning, because when they retire or other or they're ousted, whatever the circumstances, there's usually, particularly for electeds of color, a huge vacuum. And that's because elected officials of color are just focused on the same thing that their marginalized constituents are, which is survival. There is not usually a golden parachute waiting for Black elected officials, because, and minority and AAPI and Latinx, because if they've done their job right, they have pissed off so many people. Places that would normally be a safe place to land don't exist for them. You know, when you think about, may he rest in power, people like Councilor Turner took a second mortgage on his house to open a district office. That's what Beacon Block is getting at. We have more constituent demands because we are first. We do reflect the hardships of our communities because we've lived it. And so the hurt is greater and the demand is greater. And so I just wanted to say those three things. Complete your census. We have to focus on the people behind the people. That's succession planning. And then finally, once you get people elected, try not to make the whole relationship just about the transaction of electoral politics. Check in on people. Because I'm going to tell you, Mehreen, Sarai, Jamali Vido, Liz Miranda, Nika Elgardo, I could go on. The level of vitriol, incredible threats that we experience, particularly for how we show up in the world, is overwhelming. I'm raising that because I see in the chat that someone said, how do you protect your families? Because now, with the platform of social media, what that invites, there are a lot of warriors in basements, eating Cheetos who feel real bold. And their rhetoric is hurtful and it is damaging. And I promise this will be the last thing I said. I'm not taking my earrings off. There's no problem here. It was just falling. Hold on. Let's not start.
I don't know what that means.
There's no beef here. Okay, I'll take them off because they're falling. But
I'll get my Vaseline over there if you want.
But let me just say this on the identity politics thing. That is a charge that is only lobbied against women and people of color. Because if you are a veteran and you bring your representation to your candidacy, that is celebrated. If you are someone who battled substance use and now is in recovery, and you bring that to your candidacy, that is celebrated. If you were a laborer and you were an iron worker and you bring that to your candidacy, that is celebrated. I represent a seat that I started in as an unpaid intern, working 3 paid jobs to do it 25 plus years ago. That seat was once held by John F. Kennedy. When he was elected president as the first Irish Catholic, the globe celebrated. So you cannot let people off the hook of saying that identity is irrelevant and that representation isn't powerful. They are just selective about when it can be applied. So take up your space.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you. One thing that's been really fascinating for me, and I'd love to hear from you, Sam and Reynolds, on is sort of this inside-outside political strategy, right? All of you on this panel discussion have at one point or another or currently serve in halls of power, but many of you, if not all of you, have also served outside as agitators, as organizers, as policy makers, and others. And so I'd love to hear, especially in your role now, Sam, with the Korean American Citizens League of New England, but then also the Asian American Commission, and then also Reynolds, in your world of public affairs and government relations. And a lot of the work that you do is helping nonprofits, especially in this civic space, tell their stories to the world, really. I'd love to hear sort of how do you influence policy from the outside?
So as a member of the commission, I was definitely had the honor of serving, thanks to my former boss, Speaker DeLeo. And if we go back into the spring, when the coronavirus first hit the shores of the United States, you saw a massive spike in racism towards the Asian American community. It wasn't happening before, but it was very much at the forefront now, when it was very much in people's faces, and there was a xenophobic fear that was spreading throughout. As quickly with the virus it was spreading quicker. And so through the commission, we came together, we held a press conference in front of the State House, and it wasn't just Asian American legislators and leaders that were there, but the Black leaders showed up. And then when it came back around on Memorial Day weekend with the murder of George Floyd, and I'll never, with Officer Tutal also standing in front, being complicit to that murder, and then the rebirth of the Black Lives Matter movement, it was important to many of us on the commission that we were unequivocally in support and standing in solidarity with the Black community. And that meant not just saying that Black Lives Matter, but calling out the anti-Blackness within the Asian American community. That's something that we have to address, that we have to take on head on. And because we cannot go to the Black community and ask for solidarity to stand beside us when we turn our backs on them. And so that was a mistake that I made now going back into the spring, when I called and made a video calling for the Black community to stand beside the Asian community, and I got a lot of angry phone calls from, and it was important that, that I just humbled myself and I said, you know what, like, I need to take a step back and listen. And I think that, this inside-outside baseball game that you're talking about is that right now everyone's talking at each other, and especially with the advent of social media. Rep. Pressley nailed it again when she talked about the Cheetos, right? Like I do these TikTok lives every single night from 10 to 2, and I have these people that are coming on that are behind fake profiles that, they have these ridiculous usernames that say the N-word in it. And I'm like, I'm like, hey, you feel so brave? Go on Instagram Live with me. Show me your face. Let's do it. Like, you want to debate me on the fact that you think that Black people haven't been discriminated against, that you want to ignore slavery, you want to ignore Jim Crow, you want to ignore the Black Code, you want to ignore mass incarceration, you want to ignore what's going on, like, you want to ignore all this, like, all right, let's talk about it face to face. Never show up, right? They never show up. So if you don't show up and you don't put your face to it, what is that saying about what you actually believe in, right? That means you inherently know what you're saying is wrong. And so I think that's part of the issue right now, is that we're all talking at each other. We're not doing enough listening. And our leaders right now, in general, are not delegating to elevate. They are scared and they're pointing the finger at one another instead of calling truth to power and being someone like, Representative Pressley, like Councilor Butt, like Councilor Rivera, and being the first person to stand alone in a room by themselves when everybody else is pointing their finger at them, calling them crazy, saying all kinds of things to them that are unfounded and untrue, and saying that but being brave enough to stand in that room alone because it is the right thing to do, and not waiting for other people to do it. And I think that part of the problem is the fact of, like, everyone is trying to, within the building is afraid of what's going on outside, because people don't actually know what decisions are being made. So for instance, like, when I was in the speaker's office, there was a lot of things that would happen within the decisions that were made within our office that the media or activists or community members thought there was something nefarious going on, when it was just because they didn't have all the puzzle pieces. So because they didn't have all the information, and we may not have had all the information, there was a lot of miscommunication. And because of that, that led to a lot of mistrust. And I think it goes both ways.
Reynolds?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I would say from the inside outside, I think a lot, and I encourage all staffers listening and folks who are in City Hall or at the State House or, what have you, to do the, I guess what we're talking about here, the outside experience. The impact you can have from the outside, whether it be at a nonprofit or in my case, like at a lobbying firm, as I was previously in Boston, or now at a communications firm doing public affairs, the impact you can have, in my opinion, is in some ways a lot greater because of institutional knowledge you have from your previous role. So, for instance, if a nonprofit is approaching you to, join the fight for, or they want to join the fight for raising the minimum wage to $15, you might have already interacted with that nonprofit as you were an aide for Councilor so-and-so or state rep, whoever. The institutional knowledge that you might surprise yourself as far as what you are aware of, what factors to pay attention to that you might not have, or that others might overlook. It's a breadth of experience that I think can be a lot more valuable to both not only the place where you work after working in public life, but also to that public staff, to those folks. You can tell them, you can pull them aside and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Seriously, let's work together and do this. You can have those conversations and speak their language, literally, and depending on whatever hall it is. I think there's a lot of good causes out there that you will find, especially among, firms or corporations or nonprofits led by people of color, or from diverse communities. They don't necessarily have the ability to afford fancy retainers for a lot of these places, right? Big communications firms cost a lot of money, and you'll see a lot of places struggle to get that extra edge. But also by being in a space like I am now at SKDKnickerbocker, we're taking on an entire multicultural practice. We are taking on some clients pro bono or at a reduced rate because we recognize that this work is important. It is vital. It's something that we've always wanted to get into, and now we're just trying to seize on the moment. So I'm working with clients like the Collective PAC, and I know the Congresswoman is familiar with them, but their mantra is literally to build Black political power, and they do that through focusing on certain races that Black folks can win. They endorse candidates. They also do a Black campaign school, training operatives, training people to run for office, training folks to do messaging and field organizing across the country. And that I would have not necessarily had the passion that I do for working with this client or others had I not worked in a public space where I saw the need for there to be more people of color on these staffs or more people of color in elected office. Seeing it firsthand, obviously I felt that, but actually seeing it firsthand has translated into my ability to serve a client, my firm, and the cause much better. So I encourage folks to really consider it. Absolutely.
Yeah, very quickly, I just wanted to piggyback off of that. I think that one of the things we need to do is, as much as we are recruiting representatives and people to run for Congress, we also need to be actively recruiting staff members, people to go into the private sector, to work as lobbyists, work as campaign managers. And one of the quickest ways to actually change a district, right? In a district that is predominantly white, that has historically been white, instead of trying to get a person elected in office, why not also try to get someone to be the chief of staff or the legislative director there? That you have the legislator's ear so that you're pushing them in the direction of policy that you need them to get to. And so there's so many different ways that we can do this, but we think about it, especially when we're marginalized and you only see one way out. Like, I think people always think, okay, let's just get that face in there. But as we saw with President Obama, putting a Black face in a high place doesn't eradicate racism. Right? And so we have to be honest with ourselves, is that it's a multi-pronged approach. It's not just from the outside, but it's from the outside, inside, from underground, from up top. It's a multifaceted approach, and we can't just think about it as saying, if we just get people elected, that's going to change. No, it takes everybody to be a part of this fight. And that means that it's just not even just the staffers, but we need to get the damn interns involved, right? We need to get them from being young. Like, why do you need to vote? Why do you need to participate in the census? And also, like, why do you need to show up, right? Young people just are still not showing up. I'm 28 years old. Like, not enough of my friends are voting. And that's part of it is my fault, because I need to drag their asses out to the polling booth. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to say about this. We clearly, don't have enough time. I don't want to take up too much space because we do have amazing panelists here.
Speaking of interns, we need to pay our interns. I applaud Representative Pressley and other members of the Congress and other elected officials for paying interns. It's important. It is the difference between being able to get political governmental experience or having to work a different job to be able to make ends meet for your family. And, so I do definitely want to just give Rep. Pressley and others a shout out for that. Having been an unpaid intern myself, it's an amazing experience, but experience doesn't pay the bills. So we are exceeding our time. And so the chat box is popping. I appreciate everybody with all of your feedback and questions. Unfortunately, we could go on for days. This topic is amazing. You all are making me want to do a part 2 to this. But let's just wrap up with ending remarks, with closing remarks. If we can take about a minute or less per person to do this, Rep. Pressley, because you have to go for votes, because that's your job.
Big square in a minute. I gotta go.
We'll let you start.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you to Black Lion Strategies and the Chamber and everyone who made this convening possible. And just a reminder that everyone has a role to play in the movement. And so just building up on what Reynolds and Sam were saying, that I think people right now think that your only way with which to civically engage is to run for office and to vote. And there is so much in between. So it really is as simple as what Roosevelt said: do what you can where you are with what you have. Recently after a talk that I gave, someone approached me and said that they had started a community garden, and I know the gravity of our challenges are so big that you might feel like, okay, well, what's the impact of that? But when we live in a food apartheid system, and because of the complexities of structural racism, our communities have been hardest hit by COVID-19, that matters. So do what you can where you are with what you have. Your opportunities to civically engage and to be a part of this movement building critically important work are not just to run for office and to vote, but please do make sure that you do vote and that you also complete the census. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Councilor Butt, closing remarks?
So to echo exactly what Congressman Pressley said, I say it all the time that voting, and I'll add the census to that, are the minimum that we can do. There should be no question that everyone does the minimum, and there's just so many ways to get involved. You don't always need to run for office. Some of the folks have asked, we take hits. I've had online trolls, false rumors about me in town, and it's, again, an unpaid job. But we do it because the movement that we're all in is worth it. So just find ways to get involved, whether it be on issues that are important to you, whether it be immigrants, environment, women's reproductive health, work on other campaigns, sit on their boards. I work at Planned Parenthood. I am constantly looking to get diversity on our boards. One of my committee members is actually on this call. So find ways to do the work. Everyone doesn't need to run for office, because that's part 2. Running for office is not easy. It is not easy. And there are tricks, Sam will tell you, it is not easy, but it is rewarding, but there are other ways to engage. And so find out what you're passionate about, and I will echo, do your census, but also vote and take 10 friends to the poll. Harass your friends to get them out and vote every single election, all down ballot. That's the only way we're going to make change. Yeah, and thanks, everyone. It was so nice to do this.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rivera.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing this. It looks like it might need a part 2. I just want to say that, again, I'm a firm believer that we're a divine creation by a divine creator, and all of us have something, right? The problem is that our something is constantly measured by society's model of what greatness or that something should be. And so all of us, regardless, never look at your greatness or your something compared to someone else, because what you have to offer is amazing. And although if you're the one in the position of elected power, or you're the one that actually made 10 phone calls, or you're the one that help bring groceries during COVID epidemic, whatever it is, or you're the one that prepared soup, whatever it is, where your something is so important. And it goes back to kind of a story of Nehemiah. I call it, I ran, when they talk what was my strategy, I called it the Nehemiah strategy when I ran and how I govern. And it was about how the people of Israel had to rebuild the wall that was broken down. They had no political power. They had no money, no anything. And it came out of the people that said, let us build. And then all of a sudden, when they were building and structuring these walls, it wasn't about aesthetics. It was also about rebuilding their soul, their heart, their belonging. And everybody got into it. And it was about taking responsibility about their part of the wall. So they had to create this whole mural, this whole kind of wall surrounding a city, which was a ginormous feat. But what they did was everybody took responsibility for their part of the wall. And it didn't matter who you were. If you were, it says there were people who were the welders, but there were people who were perfume makers. What did the perfume makers know about masonry, right? Nothing. But there was obviously something they brought to it. Or there was, before women were known to do hard labor, there was the women that talked, the daughters of so-and-so worked on the wall. And don't worry about what the wall next to you, because we often look at what that person doing on that side of the wall. Mind your business and take care of your part of the wall. So if all of us actually take responsibility for our part of the wall, and in between you see in that story that there are people that will criticize how you're building, what you're building, and then it says, and yet we still build. And you know what, regardless of what they throw, regardless of what they criticize, stay focused on what you need to do. What you have to offer is amazing. Never compare it to anybody else, and just do it. Do it and do it well, and do it with the best of your ability and with passion, because we need you. We need each and every one of you for what that little something is or that big something is, but it's not either little or big. It is your something. And take responsibility for your part of the wall and get out there and let's build together.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera. Reynolds Graves.
Yeah, thanks, Sam, and thanks for everybody for being a part of this. I think it was a great discussion that definitely needs to happen and keep happening. I guess my last piece of advice would be to all the folks who are interested in getting politics out there, who are in it now. Do not let people put you in a box when it comes to doing this work. If you are a person of color, do not just be a field organizer. Ask the finance person if you can shadow them on the campaign and bring in the money. If you want to do press, go to the press conference and express your interest. Ask the questions, because too often we are focused on, yes, getting more people of color into this business, which is politics, right? But it's also, where are we? You know, are we the body man or body woman to a non-black candidate or elected official? Most often not. Shout out to Sam, though, for being body man to the speaker. Prime example of the things that we need to keep happening more often is the press secretary to the mayor, black or white? Is the finance director on the campaign black or white or woman or transgender? These are things that I think can add to the diversity. So we're not just saying, oh yeah, we've got diverse people. They're all in the field section of the campaign. They're all in constituent services. For us to be able to actually grow in this field and to bring others with us, I think we have to really be representative of the diversity of the different roles in politics, and that'll make a better campaign, a better public office, and just got a better infrastructure for others to come along and to bring others along with us.
Agree with you. Thank you so much, Reynolds. Sam, Hyun.
Yeah, I think Reynolds was spot on. I want to definitely lift up everything he just said too. The way I see it is, the United States is a puzzle piece, is a 350 million plus puzzle piece. And that means that every single one of us is made differently. We have a different role to play, whether we're the top right corner, bottom left corner, top. We are all shaped differently, but individually, we may not mean much into changing the face of America. But collectively put together, when we're put in the right place and we're used for the way that we're supposed to be used, we come to create this brand new picture of what this world could be like. And so what I want people to remember is that it may seem incredibly daunting when you're trying to change the world, when you're trying to change the country, when you're trying to do it alone. But when you remember that we're a small piece in a much bigger puzzle, that we all have a role to play, and that if we're not playing our role, then we're not going to be able to actually create the world that we're looking for. So that means that each person in their own place, in their own way, needs to do exactly what they're supposed to do. And to echo the words of the greatest sports organization to ever exist, do your job. And when you do your job, then we're all going to be able to actually monumentally change the way that this country looks like, feels like, and actually make this country, the American dream, ring true for the first time in the history of this country, right? And what gives me a lot of hope is that I see people like Reynolds, I see Councilor Butt, Councilor Rivera, Representative Pressley, Sam, all the folks who've been here. There's still 57 people left on this webinar, and how can you not have hope? And so in this time, and the detractors, the people who don't want change, the people who want to keep America with shackles on the feet of people of color, they don't want that change, and so they want to discourage us. And they're playing a different game than we're playing. So they're going to be lying. They're going to gaslight you. They're going to try to manipulate you by saying that what you know to be true is not true. They're going to try to rewrite history. But we have to own our truth and know your truth. And excuse my language, but know your fucking worth. And so know your worth, know that you're important, go out there and vote, make your voice be heard, and together we're going to change the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and our attendees. Those of you who are still with us 17 minutes now after the event has technically ended. And I agree with you all. We could have gone on and on and on. And I hope we do find other opportunities to convene. I want to thank you so much to our panelists for this enlightening conversation, for sharing your truths, for showing up and stepping up every day in your spheres of influence. You are all role models to me. I look up to you in many ways, and I appreciate our friendship. This has indeed been recorded. We will be sharing the video out soon. On behalf of all of us here at City Awake, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, Black Lion Strategies, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, please feel free to visit cityawake.org/fun for more information on what else is in store for this 5-day festival. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great weekend. Please be safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.